joining us. This morning we are discussing the way we send people off after their service to this nation. Some have legally mandated remunerations and basically things to send them home. And that's now not enough. We have decided also to give them something extra, especially when they've served very well. And that has sparked off a very interesting discussion. There is now the Auditor General who is leaving, a decent, one of the most decent individuals you will ever come across, Mr. John Mwanga. And to discuss that, we've had the Honorable Enos Honorable Enos Asimwe. He's a Member of Parliament for Kabula County. Honorable Paul O'Mara, an international economist of repute, businessman, a farmer, and a smart man, and Professor Mandebisa Mwambutsia, an academic. No. Professors have their way of doing things from Makerere University. And then we have Professor Isaac Christopher Lubogo, a constitutional lawyer, but for purposes of this show, he prefers to be known as a Lodon. The Lodon now is in. You've been listening in. Is all this legal? Take us and walk us through the intricacies and where the gaps are in your, what do you call them? In your humble opinion.
I pray and ask you, my brother, Mr. Samson Kasamba, to give me substantive time so that I can make my dispensation in detail, because I want to chronologically take us through the process and we comprehend and understand, first of all, the genesis and the misnomer that we have with this word, service award.
That's why I took the breakaway.
Absolutely.
Submit.
And I like the questions that you're asking.
You will submit uninterrupted.
Well, thank you, sir. I like the questions you're asking. They deeply got into my soul and spirit. And the question that I ask is whether or not we as a country still have a soul, or anything that we call a soul, if we contextualize what is happening today. First of all, I would like to argue and make a presentation that the discussion that I'm about to make is premised on a philosophy called la casade de papel. La casade de papel. I will explain that to you, my brother Samson Kasamba, in due course. But let me first of all lay background. Remember something that the Honorable Professor here said in the argument that was making, as far as making a proposition or an invocation to the esteemed Honorable Member of Parliament there, whether or not, actually you probably asked, whether or not when they do exercise their mandate, they do that in consultation and in lieu of recognition of the people or the ordinary person. And I would like to argue and say, Salus Populi lex suprema, meaning the welfare of the people should ultimately be supreme. And also add Vox Populi, Vox Dei. The voice of the people should be the voice of God. Now, therefore, let me go one chronologically and explain even the debate that we had off here. Parliament, by virtue of Article 85(1), has mandate to determine emoluments, not so. Now, the argument of the word emolument can also be described and emphasized in this perspective. Number one, it would include things to do with pension, gratuity, and allowances. Not so. This other word called service award is a word that for now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm failing to find where it fits. Because even Parliament, when they were deliberating on the award that they just gave out recently, were struggling whether to call it a handshake or a service award. And I will give my basis on that. Article 98 creates a procedure, not so, for under which the introduction of new emoluments and also alterations, upward alterations. One thing that you must understand about the uniqueness of this is that Parliament has actually sandbagged itself in respect to issues that have to do with their own emoluments, with their own appreciations, and they are very comfortable. And that's the reason why I'm also going to make a dispensation in light of the Honorable Mbuga case that you were trying to refer to. Now, Article 87A creates what they call the Parliamentary Commission establishment, not so. And also by virtue of the Administration of Parliament Act, which they relied on, particularly Section 6A up to H, also creates those nitty-gritties of how these things are supposed to be dispensed with. What is important to note is that Section 6, in light of Article 87A, together with Article 154 and 156, creates what we call a charge on the consolidated fund. And that is something you must understand. That position was agreed on in the case of the Supreme Court case of Wilson Mwesije versus Parliamentary Commission of that is Constitutional number 8 of 2016. And also, when that position was presented by the Law Society, and they were actually making an argument and they were calling this award illegal, there was a response from the Clerk of Parliament together with members of the legal team. And they tried to rebut that. And according to their rebuttal, they say, listen, Parliament has got a mandate to do that. And they said they're not arguing against that. They have got their mandate by virtue of what? Article 85, by virtue of Article 83, by virtue of the Administration of Parliament, Section 6, not so, and onwards, not so. But also, in their rebuttal, they also made something that was interesting. And I'm going to tell you something. Please permit me. I also said something about the leaked minutes that had to do with the Parliamentary Commission when it came to giving out the so-called Lubogo award. And that is the way the things are coming out, GC. And I'm going to explain to you, more importantly, why even the Auditor General, as we speak today, is being comprehended the way he is. And I'm not being personal. I'm arguing the law as it is. Number two, that's supported together with the case of Crispus Oyema Odongo, which was argued by the Honorable, but then the one was Clerk of Parliament by then, made that proposition and said that there was a statutory charge on the consolidated fund. And that is true, and we're not debating against that. Especially for self-accounting entities like Parliament. Parliament is one of those entities that self-accounts, not so. And therefore they can sit at any time, agree on a figure, as long as that is passed before the minister, put before the table, and they agree on it, and then they self-account and do their things. And that was the escape route that they used when they're arguing out to make a distinction between the case of Wilson Mwesije vis-a-vis the case of Oyema Odongo. That's the escape route that they tried to use by the Honorable Adam Mwesije in terms of that argument. His argument was that in spite of that, Parliament has this mandated body within itself. And it envisages, it has 2 years before the expiry of the next year. They sit down, they make a budget, they anticipate, they agree that these are things that we're going to do. And then they pass it on. And they pass it on to the president who assents, who agrees, and does whatever they do. Now, let me take you through another story. Section, my brother talked about the National Audit Act, which is 2008, which creates, of course, the mandate of the Auditor General, particularly by virtue of Article 163. Now, what is the duty of the Auditor General? The duty of the Auditor General, basically, is to do what? To act as a public accountant, if you like, to make sure that the audit accounts as far as public officers are concerned, as far as court is concerned, as far as central government is concerned, as far as local government is concerned, as far as universities are concerned, as far as public corporations are concerned, anything that acts of parliament do as long as it's on behalf of the government. That is something that you must understand from the word go. So we see a relationship, whether you like it or not. The actual person who actually controls the consolidated fund is who? The Auditor General. And so we know, remember, Parliament has an undisputed charge on what? On the consolidated charge. Whether you like it or not, as far as they're concerned, if they're saying this, nobody's going to touch them. And that's the escape route they're going to use. And the person who gives them the green light is who? The Auditor General. Not so. Yes, I know, but also because of the fact that the Auditor General, by virtue of the Auditor General is actually understood to mean the Supreme Audit Investment Unit. Supreme Audit Investment Unit. So the fact that it enjoys, that has the to size that mandate, which Parliament doesn't have. So Parliament by virtue of the fact that it has the charge on the consolidated fund, enjoys that relationship with the Auditor General, regardless whether we like it or not. And as I said, it approves withdrawals from the consolidated funds, and this especially relationship, this is a relationship, if you like, a love relationship in the two. Okay? It also has what they call special investment, whatever, and also grants, warrants, and even has exercise on the petroleum fund. That is something you must understand. Now, bearing in mind that there were some smuggled leakages that happened during the issue that, during the Honorable Mpuga case, where 1.7 billion shillings was actually, given away in light of what they call service award. Even before that, in 2017, what happened? There were 43 individuals who were actually given 6 billion shillings. You remember that? When they actually went to London, and then they arbitrated a matter, and then the president gave them, what? 6 billion shillings. And that matter came before Parliament. And Parliament tried to investigate. And it was thrown to the IGG, and then, because of the powers that be, it suffocated there. Why? Because they also understood it as a service award. So my failure to understand this word service award, why are we smuggling in this word service award? Where does it come from? You asked the right question. If I'm exercising my duty here, my brother Kasum, and I'm being paid a salary, shouldn't that be sufficient enough for me to do my job? Did Dr. King not teach us one thing, that if it drops your luck to be a stupid people? Strips like Michelangelo carved marble, or like Shakespeare wrote poetry? Do your job so well that the dead, the living, and the born cannot do it any better. So the dispensation that now we are creating another award under the semblance of a service award, to me defeats the very purpose, because we are having a problem. How can you distinguish gratuity now from service award? I thought gratuity was given out in lump sum at the end of your term, not so at termination or when you decide to leave, not so, as opposed to a pension which is actually given in piecemeal.
So the question here then becomes, we have had the submission that what is being done is illegal, and that the law is black and white. Of course, some argue that not everything legal is moral, but it is legal, it is legal. Whether it is moral is another matter, but legal is legal. When they say that Parliament is doing this within its mandate, and that it is acting legally, we'll get to the morality of this. From your understanding of this, is what is being done here legal?
Yes, as far as the law is concerned, they are following the law by virtue of Article 85.1 and by virtue of Article 93. I just told you that.
Yes.
They are doing what they. But you see, the smuggling in of this.
We'll get to that. You
the
see,
interpretation.
we'll get to the bit of you.
My
see.
problem is the
I just want my audience.
Absolutely. Yes.
I just want my audience to understand that from a professor of law, no one should confuse Ugandans that there is illegality here. What is being done is legal. I'm asking the prof. The professor is saying they have acted legally. Yes or no?
It's a subjective test. Yes? And the honorable member also agreed and said, if we question, he also mentioned it, by the way, if you remember at the beginning. He said, if it's a question of law and an aspect of legality, then he brought in the aspect of the normative, jurisprudence in terms of interpretation of facts. That we call law can actually be strict and rigorous. Yeah? And that's why in my book called Ubuntu Bulamu and the Law, I make that argument of the dispensation of the law. The law should be closed with that human attitude, the aspect of appreciating that. And I think the Honorable said it, and he also said it. We are talking about a nation, for example, that whose minimum wage is about what? 130, not so. That's according to the 10th Parliament. 130 minimum wage. We're talking about a country whose average salary for monthly is about 1 million shillings. We are talking about a country whose national household survey, as far as we are concerned, is about 20.3. We are talking about a country whose poverty rate is about 90%. We are talking about a country as far as whose inflation rate is about 7.2. We are talking about a country that is ranked one of the poorest in the world. We are talking about a country whose human development index is about 0.52.
But we're also talking about a country that celebrates its rich, irrespective of how they got their money.
And that is where I said we are dealing with what they call la casa de papel. Which means now that
la casanda
papel.
La casanda papel.
Which means a money heist. If you've actually taken trouble to watch that movie called Money Heist, there's a protagonist there called the Professor, El Professor, who actually made that dispensation, when they went and acted from the bank.
Uganda loves its Robin Hood, I can assure you that. But